right now. Well, good evening and welcome. Our meeting will now come to order. Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a moment of silence for our men and women at home and abroad, for our police and firefighters who keep us safe here in our community, for first responders through all of the work that they have accomplished since the first day we heard about the pandemic, and for those who have been smitten by the pandemic, we think of you. Will we now please take a seat? With comments from department heads, from the village administrator, and from time to time from council. Let's see, it's Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two things on the agenda tonight. One will be the agreement with Nassau County Police Department for Emergency Service Bureau. We are requesting a 5-year extension to agreement we already had in place since 1997 to house the Nassau County Ambulance 2350 and the morgue van at that location. Has proven to be a benefit to this department and to the village. And now our NYU ambulance is serves as the third ambulance. And in years prior, the third ambulance was housed about 5 to 6 miles away. Now we have the third ambulance back up housed right in the village. I also have
Commissioner Jackson, can you pull your mask down? It's hard to thank you.
Okay, sorry, ma'am.
That's okay.
Okay, also I have number 7, it's conference attendance for Leadership Summit. This is important with the police reform. I'll be meeting with all the other chiefs in the state, and we'll be going over legislation mandates, bail, discovery reform, pandemic issues, traffic safety updates on equipment, and more important, police reform, and also critical high-risk incidents response. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comment. Trustee Johnny?
I think this is more of a collective conversation, but I guess I'm curious why we think we need to do this ambulance anymore. You know, we have 3 ambulances sitting outside the door every day, all day. When we use this space for something else, are we short space in the water? Do they need office space, or why not move them over to the water works? They're not providing the service to us. These guys are.
Yes, we have 2 ambulances on duty at all times. They are our third ambulance. What happens, we have a hierarchy in our ambulance call. We usually have like 5 or 6 ambulances on our list. So if 2 ambulances are not available, then we go to the 3rd, 4th, to 5th. Last year they responded to about 120 calls. Our ambulances respond to about 2,000. But it gives us a valuable backup. So if in the case they are needed, they're not coming from a long distance away. In years past, they were coming from 10, 15 minutes away. Now they're still located right in the village. They're also certified active shooter responders and emergency. They're outfitted for that and they're trained in that, so they can also help us with, God forbid, an incident. And we've had a couple serious.
I'm not opposed to it, and I'm willing to negotiate with these to do the service. So I know what they do, I know who does what. Just asking, is this space we need for something else, or is it fine? It's just an honest, I don't care either way, I'm just asking.
They do have a small office in the waterworks.
Where?
In the very back, facing the historical society.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously we can always use more space, but it's not a very large room. It's a small office.
Have we renovated that bathroom yet?
We've started, yes, the fixtures and everything have been exchanged and changed out, and yes, we're moving forward with that.
Mrs. Giovanniello.
Good evening, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I don't have anything on the agenda, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Very well.
Thank you.
Chief Sisto.
Thank you, Mayor. That's on the agenda. Just want to remind residents that falls here, that brings leaves in the street. These, remember not to park your vehicle with the hot exhaust on top of leaf piles. That will definitely start a fire, a car fire. And if there's any questions, I'll give an answer.
Fine.
Chief, I just wanted to say, I know that we had a very large fire that was on COVID area, and I know that you've been and women for addressing that, and I know you put a lot of effort in, so I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. We were there for 5 hours. We had 2 trucks, a ladder, and an engine. And we were actively putting fire out into the fire departments.
And thank goodness everyone was safe.
Yes.
Chief, where did the ladder truck respond from? Where is now?
Ladder 144 responded from headquarters.
So as we look to plan a renovation or revisit the firehouse in Entry Road, would it have been a faster response if the ladder truck was there?
It could have responded from Station 2 quicker, yes.
Very good. The Superintendent DeFrancisco.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items on the agenda this evening. Number 13 is a change order for the water tower. There were some significant delays in this project early on due to some issues with the DEC, Department of Health, and some actual internal issues. And this change order reflects the damage caused by some of those delays. The bulk of this change order has to do with the painting. The original painter plan for this project, because of delays, dropped out, and we were forced to or the contractor was forced to rebid for a new painting contractor on the tower, and the cost of that service increased significantly. So that's reflected in the bulk of this change order in front of you. Item number 14, this is a request to declare an emergency to avoid competitive bidding for debris removal from the Public Works Municipal Yard due to debris that has accumulated from Tropical Storm Isaias. And item number 15 is also a request to declare an emergency to avoid competitive bidding for the removal of mulch at the DPW yard. This is part of a request from the board to, over the next 3 years, remove all of the mulch from the yard. This will take up a part of that, remove a part of that, and also prepare us for the upcoming leaf season. Item number 16, this is also an emergency declaration for cleanup for Isaiah from the damage caused by tropical storms Isaias. This has to do with sidewalk repair, curb repair, that was damage that was caused by the trees falling down around the village. Our current vendor has stopped working, and we are forced to now gain the service of an additional vendor to come and help finish up the repairs going on in the village currently.
Okay.
Questions? I assume it doesn't mean anything, but why do we have 3 entries for Harder, just not one?
For who? I'm sorry?
Harder Tree Services, there's 3 agenda items. Why not just-
That's Mr. Blake.
And on the water tank, was it delay? Was this because the Nassau County Health Department?
It's a combination of about 3 or 4 items. There was delays with the DEC in terms of the soil remediation, which was a significant part of the delay. There was delays due to the valve issues we had in the road in front of the tower, our own internal issues. And yes, there was some delays caused by the Department of Health.
And has council re-looked at the contract to make sure we're on the hook for the increased costs?
Yes, we have had, well, we've consulted with our water consultants.
No. bidding, the words of that, to make sure we're supposed to pay for the delay. That's what I want to make sure.
Peter, Mr. B, I will.
So I don't mind approving it, but subject to confirmation of council that it's on us.
Okay, I will defer to council and have him review.
Within that review has not taken place as of this point in time. What has happened is there have been discussions between Mr. DeFrancisco and myself. Based on your question, I think it would be better not to make the representations in public, but there were explanations given as to the delay, and it appeared, based on those explanations, that it was reasonable for the contractor to make a request for a change order. With that said, we have not in our office analyzed the specific delays and related them to the specific cost increases.
I think we should do that. It won't take long, it'll take a couple of days, a week, tops. I mean, I'm okay with approving this subject to review by council.
Okay.
You should read that a little deeper into what they're saying. If there is a issue, I think they could do a little better to explain why it is. And also what we're doing.
I'm trouble here.
Joe, you and I.
I think they need to explain to us, how they came up with this number, because what I've seen is not right. And Brian brings up a good point with the contract. That's who we're responsible for. But I think they need to explain what we want to us. $465,000.
Was we want that explanation before we move?
I would like it before we move tonight.
I would agree, yeah. And again, I certainly have the same question, what's the increase? Is that differential in price, the cost to rebid somebody else to do that?
That's correct, yes. They redid the painting portion of the project.
Why don't we defer this until October 14th to give Mr. B's office a chance to look at it, and also to dig a little deeper as trustee Meyer has suggested. Why don't we just defer this to the 14th? I'm sorry.
I was going to suggest
Can we move that to the next board meeting? Let's see, Mrs. Gould.
Good evening. So tonight on the agenda, we have the annual board policies that are adopted. These are the required policies that we have: the purchasing and procurement of goods, fund balance policy, fixed assets, and investment policies. These policies that are being readopted with no modifications to the prior year. Item number 2 are transfer of funds. The first item is a transfer back to contingency from the street maintenance department at the August 13th board meeting. About $750,000. It was an estimated amount, was transferred out into the DPW department, considering that Tropical Storm Isaias had a lot of debris that was transferred to the mulch pile. And so now that the estimates are more accurate on the agenda, the remaining balance is being transferred back to contingency. The second item is funding that's needed to cover cleaning costs for COVID-related additional cleaning that's being currently done. And that transfer is coming from contingency.
Any questions?
No, actually, can we go back to number 16, Joe? The Valente on the sidewalk. So on that point, do we have any similar question on the legal side? Since Land Tech has stopped doing the work, do we have any recourse back to Land Tech with regards to that?
That's something that we are investigating. I have had discussions with Mr. DeFrancisco, and we are actively pursuing that. I'm not yet prepared to make a recommendation to the board, but the cessation of work by Land Tech has not been adequately explained to our office, and we are investigating whether there are legal remedies against Land Tech.
On a separate question, is any of the money that we're spending there reimbursable by FEMA or any other agency, given that it's storm related?
Well, we submitted for, in the application application, we submitted sidewalk repairs due to fallen trees. We submitted that portion of an estimate in the application for that.
And we're not billing the residents in these cases, right? Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Gould. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mayor. Recreation has several items on the agenda tonight, numbers 8 through 13. Trustee Garney, to answer your question, number 8 is the emergency declaration to engage Harder, and then the next two are the actual invoices submitted by Harder. In discussing this with Village Council, it was considered best practice to just put them on the agenda for information so that the board and the residents see how much we're spending for removal of trees and tree debris from the recent tropical storm. These were all emergency services that were called in to pull trees off people's houses, to take care of, I believe the number was 75 somewhat dangerous hanging branches, and to remove trees that were fallen that were just too large for our crews to handle. And that's what these are this evening. Other than that, recreation, just two quick notes. The LED light replacement at Community Park is completed. Field Screen 4, that project was done last week. We didn't miss any games tonight. Most school worked very well with our crew to make sure that nothing was black tonight. We only have 2 fixtures left to do with community, and that will be the roller hockey rink. We do have funds available in our capital budget, and we will be going to do that. I heard that before. And secondly, we installed a new safety surface at the playground at Edgemere Park, and I would encourage anybody to go over and take a look at it. This is the type of surface we're going to be specifying from now on. It is a more forgiving surface for the kids when they fall down. It looks like synthetic turf. It's not as flat, it doesn't have any of the bumps and stubbles that the rubber surfaces have. It's better for drainage, and we didn't have to do any work on those 2 beautiful oak trees that shade that playground. And that's all I have this evening, except it's nice to see you all.
I was just going to say that, Mr. Blake, I don't have a question, but it's nice to see you back.
Thank you very much.
Well, it is good to see you, and I'll tell you, I play softball on those fields, and the lights are perfect. I mean, they don't make noise, it lights up the field. Well done with that.
Thank you. We should see the substantial savings in both power
I
consumption
can see the walls up there.
and in maintenance. Yeah, it's beautiful, I know. Good stuff.
Good job.
Thank you.
Mr. Sluggy.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. Mayor, I have nothing on the agenda myself this evening. However, we're willing to take any questions on any topic except quantum physics. And I just want to also mention, since you had asked about the COVID expenses, since early March, anything we did related to the COVID pandemic that they tracked separately, and if things change or increase, we're also adding that on as well. So we've been monitoring that from the get-go.
Okay. Very well. Are there any further questions for department heads or Mr. Slotkin from the trustees? All right. Now we will move to a moment for questions and comments from trustees. Do you have any? All right, we'll move along. Now we will have citizens' comments on agenda items only. Yes, come on up to the microphone.
Look in the mic. Approximately 2.4 million. That's the new price. So the old price is about 2. Yeah, come on, thank you.
I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of September Deputy Mayor Goldberg, a second. Deputy Dwani, and all those in favor? And that motion passed 8-0. Now,
Good job, Ed.
now we will want to have citizens' comments on non-agenda items. Do you have any questions from residents? Do you have questions on, come forward, please, Pedestal. Come forward. Please give your name and address.
The microphone in my face, you know. I see the back of me, right? I'm staying in left. My name is George Salem, with 24 St. Paul's Place. 3 weeks ago, I published in the Garden City News a very long, exhaustive review of Garden City's finances. I put my heart and soul into preparing that report. Perhaps 60 to 70 hours at least, and ask my wife. She probably doubled that number. The report was addressed to you, the board, and of course the residents of Garden City, with the express purpose of staving off severe financial hardship for the village that we all love so much. There's a phrase that I've used in the past, and many of you have heard it. The silence is deafening. The silence is deafening. Thus far, I have heard nothing from this board as a whole, and only one direct contact from a trustee, Mr. Goldberg, who gave generously his time for discussing my report and gave me a 75% grade in my report. So I gotta see it. If I can help the reviews of my report, there have been 0 negative critiques that I have received about this report, and I mean that literally, not one negative comment. So here's my question. How many of your trustees have read the report? Can I ask you to show of hands? Is that allowed?
No,
No?
no, can't.
Okay. Why don't I take that? Why not?
Well, I read it, you know, I spoke.
I know.
Okay.
All right. So I'll assume that you're talking to me then.
No, I
Can I ask
respond to everything in the Garden City News? Is that what you suggest?
The report was published in Garden City News.
I understand that, George, but it's in the Garden City News, so we should talk about that in the Garden City News.
You go ahead and personal copy, or give you a hard copy if you want.
George, I also read what you wrote, okay? But it's in the Garden City News. Send it if you want. If you're seeking a response.
I'm looking for a response.
I'm looking for it. How can you respond to something in the Garden City News? People write things in the Garden City News all the time. We should respond to everything that's in it. I don't understand how you would think that's a good thing to do.
Garden City News.
Judy Courtney, 3 Tremont Street, completely different topic. And I missed the last meeting, so I may be repetitive. I apologize if I am. But I did want to commend Paul Blake and the Recreation Commission for the pool and the great season that we had there. As part of the Recreation Commission, I know that we had a lot of discussions on it. But as a member of the pool, I will say the staff did an incredible job. And some really difficult circumstances. Most people were really cooperative, but I know they had some conversations with some members that were, a little bit more difficult than others, but they were terrific, and everything was managed impeccably. It's probably one of our best seasons yet. Except for the stress of signing up.
Good evening. Walter Beal, CNY Group. I don't know if everyone turned to mayor because Mike. I've prepared some representative photos that I would like to show tonight. But prior to doing that, I'd like to give you guys the board an overall snapshot of where the stabilization work at St. Paul's currently is. Of the 4 bid packages, the 4 major bid packages of the stabilization work. They are the window protection, the vinyl removal, the stabilization work itself, and the stained glass removal. I'll take them one at a time. The window protection work is completed. The vinyl removal work is completed. And the stabilization work is roughly 50% complete. We started at the beginning of August, and we are scheduled to be complete by the end of November, which involves which I'll show you in a moment or so, which involves the mansard roof, all the holes in the mansard roof, the missing shingles and such, gutters and meter management, stormwater management, and things of that nature. There's some structural work, which I'll show you, that's underway, and so forth. The stained glass removal had the bid package itself had some delays, which are now resolved relative to insurance and insurability of the product itself. I believe that's behind us, and the bid package is done and ready to go, and I'll get into the village next week so that we can put that out to bid. After stabilization, the other, I apologize that VHB was supposed to be here this evening, your environmental consultant. The whole purpose of what we are doing is so that the building can be abated. It's important to note that everything we are doing has to be done, whether the building is ultimately demolished or developed into something else. because it has to be abated. Even if it's demolished, it has to be abated. It could not be abated a year ago or prior to this work because of the gaping holes in the building. It was continuing to erode, and it was like a live infestation. The plaster and the paint dust and lead dust was continuing to grow. So that would have continued if we had abated a year ago prior to this work. This had to be done, and it is well on the way. It'll probably be behind us, like I say, by the end of November. So the next step is VHB, your consultant, is going to give you a proposal. They've already done a phase 1 environmental study, which is basically a visual inspection, and they investigate records and such, which identify the likelihood of contaminants in the building, which there are, in fact, is a likelihood of contaminants, so that would lend itself to the next phase. They couldn't do the next phase, phase 2, until just about now. We're ready to start that process because the building is coming stable and if you can hear me. So that they're going to give you a proposal for phase 2, which is forthcoming. And that phase 2 is actually taking samples, identifying what is hazardous and the quantities of such, so that we can then put that and start an abatement process. So the building will be stable and clean, and you guys can then decide what the next step is. So if you don't have any questions regarding the overall, I'd like to show you guys a couple of representative photos where we are, and I'll try and be brief because there's a lot of slides, but if you want me to stop and you want to ask questions, feel free. And
Mr. Beal, I'd just like you to repeat one thing.
Yep.
The work that is going on now, even if we tear the building down, has to still have to be done. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Bear with me, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing here.
Here's the slides that you got.
I'm not getting Andrew.
Here's the screen.
You get it to work on the first try.
Box of cookies, would you say I was getting? Yes. Go ahead. So I have a couple of before and after photos of the vine removal. In this photo, this is the southeast section of the front of the building, where you can see the overgrowth. There's the before, and that's the after. The purpose, before I get into the vine removal, the whole purpose of the vine removal was, number one, to remove all the overgrowth from the building so that Dr. Tomasetti can ultimately do another inspection of the facade. Secondly, the vines themselves, the ivy itself, grows into the masonry mortar, and as it grows and expands, it could damage the brickwork. There are a couple of representative photos where that occurred, which are actually part of this project and will be taken care of. This is standing looking north, where Ellis Hall used to be, and this is the same elevation cleaned up. Yes.
Why would we spend this money just to develop their grant and pull it off? So I would agree
Yep.
And the condition of the building, you just can't grab the vines and pull over.
Okay, so the vines themselves had to be, there was a two-step process, I appreciate it. There's a couple of steps that occurred here. We had to cut the roots at grade and let the vines die over a couple of weeks and let the roots that were digging into the bricks get a little smaller before you could pull them out. You couldn't just go up there and rip them out of the building because you would actually rip bricks off the building. So it was a couple of steps. Does that answer your question? So there's this is the fire escape section on the east. That was the before and after cleaned up. If you can see the brick pier just under that little cornice in the middle of the photo, that brick pier had ivy all over it, and it was damaged by the ivy. That's part of our project. We're going to remove that brick and remortar that. This is the western courtyard. You know the building shape like any. There are two courtyards. The western courtyard before and after cleanup. The eastern courtyard was like a jungle. It was incredibly overgrown, and there was a tremendous amount of damage from the ivy here, before and after. Thank you. This is the front facade looking east, before and after cleanup. This is representative of the excavation that had to be done to take the roots down 1 foot below grade. We cut the roots below grade because you're not allowed to use chemicals to kill the roots. So we took them down. We excavated 1 foot below grade and cut the roots. So to buy us some time. This is an excavation work. Not all of it was soil. We had to chop through some concrete and asphalt in order to get through some of these roots, which was done. Some more of the courtyard cleanup. This is where the ambulance currently live. Some ivy pre and post. The western fire escape, and just some after photos of the facades. This is the top of the clock tower. There were several issues with the clock tower. One was there was a hole just a hole directly into the top of the clock tower. And the other issue was further on in these slides were the slate shingles, which were large sections of social mist which we replaced. There's the hole in the copper siding, and it was caulked. We added a waterproof membrane underneath that and patched with aluminum siding. This next sequence of photos is significant. This is identified on Philip Tomasetti's report as a previous patch. And what that meant was there was a tarp. If you notice there's a tarp here, there was a tarp over here. So when we pulled the tarp off, this is what we found. And it's had structural damage and such. The entire scope of work for these areas, and there are 31 of these that were identified, half of which are done by now, is to peel back plywood and siding and waterproofing to find sound structure to reattach new framing to and new plywood and repair the roof. These particular rafters were in bad shape. Rather than remove them, we added new rafters on top of them, or we attached them to them, called sistering. We sistered new joists to the old joists, added new plywood back, installed waterproofing membrane, and then new siding. These pictures are hard to see, but this entire area is repaired. And we did the same over here. There was a tarp over here. There's just another area, just before and after. We pulled the tarp off. There's a hole in the roof. We fixed it in the same fashion. This was a rather large one, same deal. This is the slate that was removed or missing from the clock tower that was patched in with asphalt shingles, because it's important to note everything that we're doing is while it is not a tarp, it's going to last for years, it's temporary. It wasn't to make this pretty, it was to keep the elements out of the building, because we don't know what's going to happen, hold everything with the building, we don't want to spend more money than we need to. This particular area is the one major structural issue with the building. This is above the grand stair, above the chapel, where each of these rafters are disconnected from a rotted sill plate, and we're waiting. We had to peel this finishes off so that the engineer for the contractor, the structural engineer that works for the contractor, can design the fix, and he'll stamp a drawing, and it's probably going to be replacing the sill and installing the rafters. We will not restore the finishes inside, but that will allow us to then fix what's on the outside. This is one giant tarp. You can't see it from the street, it's hidden from every elevation, but there's one giant tarp on the outside which has failed over the last couple of years. I included this drawing. This is one of several sketches from Thorpe Tomasetti, which showed this is the area where I walked you through those couple of slides where this identification, this light pink right here, is identified as a previous patch. It wasn't patched, it was just a tarp, and we found when we did the initial inspection, the scope of work, we assumed that these tarps were covering holes like that. So therefore, the village owns that repair. It's not there's not an extra involved in this. We have 31 of these, and there aren't going to be 31 of that magnitude. So it's slightly ahead of schedule. This is just another one of those. So that's what I got. Any questions?
Just a comment, it was great. Really created a sense of pride that we're finally doing something to help this building after such a long period of time.
Great.
I'm just curious, what's the next step?
He made reference to the beginning, but won't go into it.
So the stabilization, the bulk of the work I just showed, is keeping the building from further deterioration. It's keeping the elements out of the building. Once that's done, which is projected to be the end of November, the village's environmental consultant can go in and do a phase 2 environmental assessment where they identify what the contaminants are, what the quantities of them are, and then put them out to bid, put that package, put a bid package together, put it out to bid, and hire an abatement contractor to clean the building.
Yes. Is there going to be a referendum for the people to vote on whether they want to save this building? There's been so much money spent that's been wasted. Our roads are falling apart, our water is not good, and we're spending so much money on a building that is 30 years too late. And the majority of people's opinion. And to just keep pouring more money into this, our roads are a disgrace. Our town is becoming a laughing stock. Garden City, it's certainly not a garden anymore. Are you going to have a referendum? I don't feel that way. And that's what this microphone is on.
I realize that it sounds discouraging when you're in this
It's not
state.
discouraging, it is discouraging.
Do you want to come up so that we can hear you?
I think you can hear me. We've asked numerous times for a referendum for the people to vote on whether this building should be saved. And it has not been done. And this is what we want.
Well, I didn't think that we were going to hold a referendum to decide whether or not this building will be saved. I thought that referendum was that you didn't want any very large bonds floating for it. Okay? No.
To deterioration. Clean the vines off. One of the things we've talked about also too is the preservation of the glass, the stained glass that's in there, which is one of the things we know is a beautiful thing that's inside St. Paul's. And then what we did now is, now by sealing up the building, the next aspect that you have to do is you have to abate. And the reason that, from my personal viewpoint, that I have supported it, is because I think the residents have to have a choice. Do you want to keep the building or not keep the building? You brought up the aspect of a referendum. Myself personally, at every single meeting and every single thing I have said, I support that 100%. But before we get to that point, what you have to do is, now that we've stopped the deterioration, stopped the decay, closed up the building, you now have to go inside the building and you have to get rid of all the things out there. Because even if we all decided, and let's say the majority of people go with what you say, they say, listen, it's time has passed, let's tear it down. Before you can do that, the bottom line is you still have to abate the building. You just can't tear a building like that down. So there's all kinds of things in there. There's asbestos, there's oils, there's so many different things. So what happens is, the next step that was asked is, what are we doing next? The next thing we're doing is to go inside, find out where all the things are that have to be abated and removed, and then that has to be removed. Once that's done, your point is a valid point, that the village should make a decision on what do we want to go do from that point. And I personally, I support you 100%. But again, the next part of what we're doing needs to be done no matter what that end result is. Okay?
Okay. But I just want to tell you that a lot of the residents feel that this is really being jammed down on the roads. That's. I don't want to hear.
No, but nothing's been done. All we're doing is, the only thing that this board has approved, and I've seen other people talk, writing constantly, I'm not saying $80 million hockey rings and everything else. Okay, I know things were presented years ago, but again, the only thing that this board has approved and is working on has been the stabilization, the sealing up of the building, and the abatement. That's the only thing that this board has done. So anything else that goes beyond that, again, like I said, I'm with you 100% as far as with the referendum, but this board has not done anything else, and there's nothing being shoved down anybody's throat. This is what has to be done, no matter what we want to do with that as a community. So these steps have to be done. And I think we'll all agree that we also want to preserve and save the beautiful stained glass and stuff like that that's in the building as well. So regardless of whatever happens, those next two things have to be done, the stained glass and the abatement. Okay, from that point on, then we can definitely go the route that you're talking about. Okay?
Do we have any control over the cost of abatement? Is there any control over what might be spent, like abatement, light abatement, heavy? Do we have any idea what it costs?
They really have to do the analysis first. I mean, Walter, you can speak to this, but
I can't
say the analysis would need to be done first before there would be options developed. But I think we're all anxious to see really what the toxins and how prevalent they are in there, and then that would dictate what the options are. But you can't just knock the building down that happens. By the way, I don't advocate demolishing St. Paul's. I'm probably one of the persons here who would say over my dead body. But I think the issue of abatement is we have to do the analysis and find out what's there first, and then we can come up with different scenarios.
Let me ask you a very vital question. Will the board commit to a variety of estimates to complete development of St. Paul's before they have any vote as to whether to develop it or not?
We're not
be able to just tear down the building with all of the contaminants that are in it now. And it's the law.
That's not my question.
His question is, do we commit to, we're not in development stage.
I'm not into committing a dollar figure. I want you to commit to having financial plans before you go ahead with any ideas
There are no friends of the board. There are no friends of the board on this call.
Look, you come to the meetings, we have no friends.
You build a house and go to the builder and say, I want a house. And he's not going to ask you how much you want to pay.
There would, of course, be programming and then obviously cost estimates before you receive the development. That's not, but that's an universal statement. But we're not even there yet.
We haven't had those discussions, nothing at all.
I know, but we have to find out whether they never land or not.
What's the sale? What we have to do is we have to abate the building. That's the only focus that this board has next. That's it. Nothing past that. Once that's done, we can then have a discussion on whatever.
I'm asking for prudence, that's all I'm asking. Would you commit to...
We hear you.
Huh?
We hear you.
That was our plan. Plan was to
But
stop the leaking, get it abated, and have experts come in and tell us different ways to decide to do X, Y, or Z, and how to finance it. That was the plan.
You can't go ahead without a dollar figure.
Yes, but you don't get the dollar figure until you know what you're building.
Yes.
Well, that's what we gotta do. Figure out what do we want to build. Which can end up being nothing. But if we want to build X, it'll cost this much. Y will cost that much. And then figure out do we want to do it and how we pay for it.
In another 20 years now.
We work on it, we wait 1,000 years. Without COVID, we can put it in pretty good shape right now.
I'm asking some reasonable
Mr. Stanley, we understand your
Questions many times. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. That's been what we've said all along.
I'll go ahead and I'll vote for this plan without saying what it's going to cost. I hear people saying
Certain things need to be done. That's what we're doing the abatement, up to the abatement.
But people are all saying, I love what it used to look like 40 years ago.
But this is Mr. Salem, I've heard 25 years, I've heard every imaginable comment in regards to St. Paul's. Regardless of whatever people's opinions are, savings, they're down, too much money, we can't listen to it down. We're all across the board. Now again, which is the predominant one, I don't know. But like I said, right now, there's nothing for us to commit to or anything else like that. The only thing we're focusing right now, and I'm going to repeat myself, is the abatement. Once we get the abatement done, then we can sit there, just like yourself and the other one we spoke before. Then we can sit there and then talk about, focus on that part of the discussion.
When people say, I love the building like it was in 1952, it's not 1952 anymore. If they want to preserve the building, I have to answer the question. What it might cost to the average resident?
George, we're not
I don't know if you're insinuating there's like this big blank check somewhere that we're making. That's not the position of this board. I think we've been pretty clear. We're going in a very measured way. Right now, we're at the abatement stage, and that's all we've approved.
Just remind people that
George, we're not looking to get the building back to the way it was when it was built. We're not looking for that. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And please don't say I'm not destroyed by the city. Please don't say that. That's the first thing for the do, Mr. Delaney. I didn't say you did so. You disagreed with me directly. You said I disagree with you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah. I would like to disagree with you. You have
All right, guys, please. We are going to proceed to another discussion, and it has to do with repair of the paving streets in our village. So we are, the finance committee had a discussion, and they gave a suggestion that the board should put It took us a long time. We had, it was, you know, it was not a smooth process, and that's an understatement. Now, we do have the money for the job. It had been budgeted, and you know, if the person who responded to the bidding is going to do the job, I thought, why don't we just do it while the fire is hot? Because if we wait or we put it off, the next time we go to put it out to bid, it will be even more expensive. That was my thought. My thought was, we have the money, let's do it right now. Now, how does the public is paying for it, basically, Mr. DeFrancisco?
The businesses, yes, would get billed for the work.
I can't hear you.
It's on. The businesses, yes, and the businesses
We have the
would get
money.
billed for the repairs, correct.
Okay, we have the money, we could do the job right now. I know they have to, but we could maybe wait 6 months or something until they had to pay that bill. You know, it seems that it took us so long to get to this place, and now we're not going to, you know, it's not certain that we would do it. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, there's two parts to this, right? There is, some of the sidewalks are our road. Some of the sidewalks are owned by landowners. Just like when the sidewalk in front of your house needs to be redone, you're the landowner, it's your responsibility. That's the way we do things. Have forever. So, the question is, do we delay it? The problem is, in my mind, delaying it, there's no great solution in my head. We've delayed this for a long time. Years. Some of these sidewalks are really bad, and we're going to have liability issues because we're well aware of it. And so are the landowners. But I fully understand it's an economic hardship on everybody. That's the conundrum.
All right, Mr. DeFrancisco, this particular project is about $3.5 million?
3.2.
3.2. Of the 3.2, how much, what percentage would the owners of the businesses pay?
I think it's about 2.7 years. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
All right, about 2.7. All right, so the reason that I'm not in favor of this is because whether or not, and I understand that things get delayed, financially, this can't be done no matter how you look at it. The first thing is that we cannot sit here and go to the businesses that have had an unbelievable year due to the situation with COVID. Some of them have already gone out of business, a few of them, but expenses of course like this probably could push some of them over the edge. And the bottom line is that in my mind, it would be cruel to sit there and to go to the businesses on 7th Street and to say that we're now going to do this massive project. I understand that the point is that there are several sections and the work needs to be done. The other aspect of this is the village cannot sit here and we can't say, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll do the work and we'll pay for it all. And the bottom line is that what we're then going to do is that we'll gradually get the money from it. Again, that sounds nice, but financially, we are not in the position to spend an additional $3.2+ million from the village. With all the other things that we did, the budget that we passed and everything else, fiscally, that doesn't make any sense. So unfortunately, as much as I want to address these things, and I think it makes sense, is that neither the business nor the village, in my opinion, can afford to take on that expense and then gradually pass it on to people. You have the money or you don't, and we don't, the village does not have that ability to take on that risk without hurting our village finances.
I think it's probably smarter to continue with kind of like the spot fixing that you have to do, and we revisit, you know, on a regular interval every 6 months or so to see when we can proceed with the project. But clearly, at this point, it seems wrong to undertake something like this where we would put the stress on the businesses.
Would person who owned the building pay that back, or would the store that rents it? Huh?
Well, with COVID and everything, Teresa, it feels like we'd be requiring to pay them to pay a lot of money.
Well, maybe we could just do it, since we've done through so much to get this far into the bidding and so forth, and the bidding is good, they don't have to pay it so that we get a vaccine. We have that budgeted, that's my understanding.
No.
Don't we? I'm sorry.
It's a $3.2 million project. We budgeted $8.7 million.
Mrs. Wu, you don't have that money?
So the capital project was budgeted and funds were allocated to it, but so was the revenue to be received by the businesses. So if we expend the monies to do the project now, we have a shortfall on the revenue side.
All right, didn't realize that we had a shortfall. That's too bad, really. It took us so long to get up to that. And some of the streets are poorly paved. I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah, Louis, I hear what you're saying, except the problem is, there's a lot of spots, and who's paying for the spot that we're fixing?
Well, I think
Normally, if I fix my house, and there's a flag in front of my house, I pay for it, yes. If there's a building, commercial building on 7th Street or Franklin, that has 9 feet that has to be redone, that should be done. Everybody would agree, this is a bad spot.
Right.
Who's doing it, and who's paying for it?
I would say it's a big difference in saying, hey, there's a safety issue outside, and you have to replace 9 feet, as opposed to we're going to replace 160 feet of frontage and back. You know what I mean? I would think that it's more reasonable to say, fix what's broken.
But the evaluations, the engineers did the evaluations of all the sidewalks, especially on Franklin Avenue. The bulk of the work would be Franklin Avenue.
Yeah.
And determine based on their evaluations, what needs to be repaired, what is out of compliance and needs to be repaired.
Right. We're just
So
not
that's
doing
what this project is.
We're not doing the blanket, the street all over.
No, I
We're doing spots.
But what you're telling me is all $3.2 million is so terrible, we're exposed to trip and fall because of every dollar of that money.
Yes. Yeah. And that's almost a 2-year-old number.
I don't know. That's a problem. I didn't think that Franklin Avenue was that bad. That sounds like it would.
It's Franklin, 7th, and the business district.
Also, when you touch one area, if there's something else happens, you have to think of bigger areas when you're fixing something.
I get it. I wonder, hang on a second, too. I'm gonna put a different hat on and say, when we ask for this assessment, we ask it a certain way. Maybe we should ask what the kind of bare minimum is or phasing of it to only go to the worst parts first and kind of stretch it so that we don't have to hit all of it. No, absolutely you can do that. You could say, where do we start? What's the worst, the most offensive pieces? And then
Next week, just so you know, I'm starting a plaintiff's sidewalk before we confirm. I'll be sending you a letter. That's the reality.
No, listen, I'm not trying to make anything unsafe. What I'm just asking for is, literally, we have to do everything all at once, or is there a way to phase it? Did we ask our consultant for a phased-in plan, or is it all at once?
This was done in-house, the village engineer.
So maybe that's even better. Let's ask the engineers to see if there's a way we can.
Joe, but when did you send letters out to the landowners that they were supposed to decide? It's been a year.
It's about a year ago for, Franklin
And
Avenue.
no one's done it. Most of them wanted us just to do it. A few landlords did it.
Well, they have the option of hiring their own firm and doing the work themselves to the village standards, and some of them have done it. But if they don't, and we put them on notice after 30 days, then we reserve the right to go in and repair it and bill them for that work.
And Joe, in particular on 7th Street, online as with everybody else, that whatever construction you do, that now, once we start that, it has to be ADA compliant.
That's correct. The old, yeah.
The old, which I'm just saying, that's one of the reasons why I find it difficult that we're going to do this piecemeal.
when do you think you should do it?
You know, I mean, if you can tell me when COVID is over, you can tell me when these businesses have a chance of coming back to some sense of normalcy, that's one thing. The only other way you can do this financially, if we really want to go to do this, is you have to sit there and look at the village finances and say, what else do we want to sit there and delay or put on the back burner in order for us to allocate money and to bond this and spend the money?
Well, the money's there, it's the revenue coming back, that's the issue. So is it then that we can go ahead and do it and then give, you know, maybe meet the businesses and see?
No, what you're gonna do is, again, sitting there saying the money's there, the money is not sitting there. What ends up happening is, no, it's not sitting there in a jar. What ends up happening is we're gonna end up, this is what correct me from home, we're gonna bond this, correct?
No, these, because this is a reimbursable project,
No, forget about the reimbursement, so we're not getting any reimbursement, so we're gonna lay the money out, and then at some point in the future, we're gonna get the money back. So in order for us to lay the money out, we would have to bond this, correct?
Or
We don't have $3.5 million just sitting there.
you could use surplus.
Well, we could use surplus, which is even scarier. So now we're gonna take money out of our safety net in order to pay for 7th Street and the thing. So I mean, to me, that's fiscally irresponsible. So the last thing I would do is take money out of surplus in order to turn around and to do the project. So the only other way you can do this is that you're gonna bond this, and if you wanna do that, again, like I said, then you have to consider the other things that the village is doing. We have to get the money from somewhere.
I thought that we had.
Get a little bit of input of what our exposure is here from council.
The law provides that if it is on notice of a defective condition in the sidewalk and someone slips and falls and injures themselves, the party who injures him or herself cannot sue the village unless the village had notice of that defect in advance, generally speaking. So if no one slips and falls, then you're not going to have an expense on that side of the ledger. But our firm handles slip and fall cases for the village routinely. People slip and fall. And therefore, if you have your own staff identify a defect in the sidewalk, and then someone slips and falls on that defect, it's not going to be a defense that you plan on repairing it next year or the year after. You have a reasonable period of time. They're not going to hit you as if it was 24 hours later, but we've already identified it a year ago. Therefore, anybody slipping and falling on it now who would not have available the defense that there was not prior notice of that defect. Now, I'd also make the observation, village code does not distinguish between a commercial property owner and a residential property owner. Both owners of real property have to pay for the maintenance of the sidewalk adjacent to their property. So you have a difficult choice. On the one hand, you can pay insurance premiums that contemplate the possibility of slips and falls, or you can repair the sidewalks and bill that to the adjoining landowners, which if they don't pay, are added to their tax bills. Those are really the choices.
Now, the only thing that I want to point out here is the surplus fund. One of the things that this village has always had is a financial strength. When Sandy hit, any storm has ever hit, we were able in Garden City to get everything done. You know why? We had the money. And when all the other villages were waiting for their reimbursement and everything else like that, Garden City turned around and said, guys, come to us this way. You're going to get paid tomorrow. And you know what? They lined up to get the work done. Okay? Now we're sitting here. If we take that surplus down, like I said, you want to give me something in writing, give me a guarantee that we're not going to have an emergency like that again, I'll sign off on it tomorrow. But the problem that we have is that we sit here now and take that surplus down and then do not have any idea when and if we may get the money or how many of those businesses may default or owners or anything else. We are now putting the village in a position that we've never been in. Why why would we put ourselves into that type of financial position to reduce our surplus, which is the cushion that this village has? Right now, we have all these PPP expenses and everything else that we've done. We've sat there and the board has approved to take money and to use it for different projects and stuff. Why? Because we have that flexibility. If we sit here, in my opinion, and if we do this, you are taking that flexibility away from the village. And if in the event we face any type of an emergency, you don't have that question. So, like I said, that's just my opinion.
There may be some aspects to this which I would prefer to discuss in executive session regarding liability for slip and fall accidents, but broadly speaking, you still have the choice about what you want to do for sidewalk repair, and if you do it, billing the adjoining landowners, etc. Of course, the village code can also be changed by local law. Those are other options.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any moratorium on fixing sidewalks for the residents?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Is there any moratorium on fixing sidewalks for the residents? No.
No, because you're talking about apples and gasoline.
No, I'm just saying.
No, we're comparing apples and gasoline. Mr. Business Jones, Mr. Business,
Okay.
you have $250,000 expenses. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you have $1,500 expenses.
Oh, so their money's not as good as the commercial? I don't think we know.
$250,000 versus $1,500.
I think if we're making me replace my sidewalk, then we probably should be fair and make the business guy replace the sidewalk.
Didn't say you should.
I'm just, well, you didn't let me finish. You were fighting with your shadow boxing over there. I'm trying to tell you that, I'm trying to find, the fairest way to do it. Obviously, exposing the village to slip and fall lawsuits is not a great thing. So, while I sympathize that I want to cut the businesses some slack, we're not doing it for, anyone left to replace their sidewalk, which I feel like every time I was the worst possible time to replace my sidewalk, I feel like nobody showed up in the mail. So, while I understand it, it feels, again, wrong to open our broadside for slip and falls.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that a failure to repair makes the village liable. I'm simply saying that you lose the defense of prior notice.
You ever think about, we got to think about, and I'm not arguing with this president, this is the point of this discussion. 2 or 3 good slip and fall cases, your surplus is now gone. Yeah. So that's not the only argument about this. It's a conundrum.
Right, I agree with you 100%. And just like the budget, we can sit here, and the 8 trustees can sit and vote, and however they believe it. I simply gave my opinion.
No,
I just simply said I would never vote for it having to use surplus money for this. And to further bond, and then to add principal and interest payments, either way, is not something that this board and this village should do. That's just my opinion.
So you're more for, and again, I'm not, this isn't like a straight for, I'm just saying, so you're for basically setting the businesses, you gotta get this done on this date, or else we do it.
No, what I'm in favor of is sitting here saying, we have a choice to make. And the choice we have to make is we either delay this, even though I don't want to, or we sit there and we make a decision. We want to go down A or B. And A is we sit there and we say, we're going to do the work, we're sending the bill, you guys got to pay. And whatever happens to businesses happens. Choice B is the village says, we're going to finance the whole thing, however this board decides to do it. And we're going to do all the work, and then we'll gradually get the money. So that's what I envision we're really talking about here. So like I said,
Well, see, we lay it out, but you seem to be not in favor of this would come out of surplus. Or we just told businesses, you have until this date to get it. We did it and there was 0 response. What was the response? We sent these letters out a year ago plus?
Approximately, yeah.
And what was the extent of the letter was due by this date or what?
It's a standard letter that we send to residents, businesses that we identify what needs to be repaired. We give you an approximate cost. You have 30 days to initiate repairs yourself, to hire your own company, or after that 30 days, the village reserves the right to come out and repair it and bill you for that expense.
So that, and what was our plan? Actually going to work? Were we going to do like all 7th Street at once, or were we just going to do it piecemeal?
we were gonna do what needed to be done, whatever was put on notice.
Do we have a sense of what the average cost would be per business? I mean, how many businesses does this have?
It varies, and, you know, businesses on corners would have a lot more expense, because they have a lot more exposure. It depended on the condition of the sidewalks, where, you know, I couldn't give you an average. I mean, first of all, you know, it's based on the landowner. You know, so somebody like Albanese owns a significant amount of sidewalks. They might get a bulk of the cost. So, you know, no, I couldn't give you that.
Fix their sidewalks?
No, they did, yes. Oh, absolutely, yes.
Some of them did, but not all.
Correct.
Of the 3.2 million, how many did? Percentage, broadly, we don't have to.
I couldn't, I don't want to say, yeah, I don't.
10%?
I can't say.
We don't know. It would be helpful in the.
Now, keep in mind, on 7th Street, there is a project scheduled by National Grid in January to replace the gas main on 7th Street. And as part of that, they replaced the gas services that feed every one of the businesses on that block. So that will, they will have to repair the sidewalks as part of that. So some of that work might be covered by this project. I can't confirm it will be or not, but.
Yeah, that would pretty much be, you know, a 2-foot section from the main line to the restaurant.
Yeah, but we should
Correct.
go ahead and fix it and then get it.
Right.
I don't know, I mean, if they had a year. Maybe we should.
Sometimes the response is not responding.
Well, that's what I mean. So maybe they're choosing for us to just do it with full done. We don't even know. Right? Because it's kind of open-ended. You don't know where you do it. So maybe it's just a non-verbal way that going just exists. Correct? Or not?
So what was the question?
I mean, the letter says, fix it within 30 days, or we reserve the right to fix it in billion. So then not answering could just be them going, hey, why don't you guys do it in billions? Okay. So it's not necessarily anyone who showed up at this meeting saying, please, we don't want to do this right now. If anything, they probably thought we were going to fix it right now. So do we have to allocate the money to do in advance work, or this we have to allocate it? We don't do it, we get the revenue back, and it's basically the other plan.
Yeah, so we allocate the funds ahead of time because we have to pay the vendors and then, you know, get the money back once we bill them. Once we get the actual bill to the vendors, it gets charged out to them based on the actual cost.
And if they don't pay us, it's included on their tax bill, so either way you cut it, we're gonna get paid.
Correct.
So when we're gonna take the money to pay for the vendors and everything else, where do we get the money?
Right now, it's allocated in the budget, so the allocation of the cost was allocated in the expense budget, but so was the reimbursement of the cost.
Forget about the reimbursement.
But
So
that's.
we're gonna pay for the work. How are we
Yes.
paying for the work?
Through what was allocated through the budget, if you don't receive the revenue, then the balance comes from surplus.
Okay, so the bottom line is that in order to lay the money out, let's just keep this basic. In order to lay the money out, the contractors do all the work. Forget about reimbursement or anything else like that. How am I paying the contractor? Where's the money coming from? Am I taking it from surplus?
Right, yes.
Okay, all right.
At the end of the year, if you don't get the revenues, then
Okay,
the
that's what I'm
surplus
just
goes
asking.
down by that bill.
So the project is 3.2 million, right?
Correct.
Okay, how much do we have in surplus? Ballpark.
Unallocated surplus, about 7 million, I would say.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our surplus in the village from 7 million down to 3.8 million. And if in the event the businesses don't reimburse us, then the bottom line is that now we're down to a surplus in this village of $3.8 million.
It's added to their tax bill. They have to pay that. It's not the question whether or not they will. It's just that when we get it back, because we get it back right away, or we get it back to tax.
Right, and until we get it back, or if they go out of business or whatever, the bottom line is that we've now taken our surplus down to 3.8 majority of people are home, they're not getting dressed going to work, going to the city, they're just sitting there. So I'm sitting there looking at that, whether or not she does it at the point. My point is that no, because what ends up happening is that if the landlord doesn't have that business there, and the landlord doesn't have the money going in there, and the landlord is at a point where they say, listen, I just don't have the money. So all I'm saying to you is that that's the financial reality. So again, it's a point of, does each board member feel comfortable enough to take that risk? My personal feeling is I don't. That's just my feeling.
It's weighing the risk of a landowner, it's not necessarily a business owner, it's a landowner covering the cost versus, exposure to possible lawsuits. And, where's our surplus that we get? And if that wasn't there, I'd be very.
I thought we had insurance,
but then
we had insurance.
But then there's an entire town to look out for here, and not just frankly having land, or some of which, as you said, and lots of.
And part of this was also, we got complaints from other landowners complaining about the condition of the sidewalks and complaining that the village was looking crappy, and why should they be paying taxes so high when the village sidewalks were crappy? That was part of this whole discussion as to why we needed to do the sidewalks. So that conversation comes back when they go in and challenge this act.
Let me ask another probing question to the board here, or to the department heads. Have we gotten any pushback from the landowners where they were like, you guys gotta be nuts right now, you wanna give us a break, or no?
The letters went out a week ago, reading that.
No, since then, have you heard anything? Right away, did you hear anything?
No.
After, during the pandemic, after, now?
I've actually heard more from residents than businesses.
Right. I would say, it's probably worth a shot where you go, look, we sent you something a year ago, lots happened. Now we're telling you, you got 30 days. Do yourself, if we do it, we're going to start this thing off in 30 days. You know what I mean? It's reasonable.
I would say that I do think in other places, the sidewalks do not look good. I mean, then things don't look tidy and they don't look really sure. It's tremendous to keep the village looking really lively to you. So.
Yeah, I guess you're not using sidewalks, and you want the sidewalks to be straight and flat, They put tables on it, people can walk on it.
I think Mark had a nice idea. We just look, a lot of stuff on. So, just a letter I can. This time, let's kind of be in.
How about sending a letter to the restaurants?
Oh, they should all get it.
They should all, wherever it needs it, we should get it. Let's give them.
It's the property owner.
Yeah, the property owner, not business.
I guess, how would this impact?